Today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Donor Perfect. It's an all-in-one fundraising software solution that helps fundraisers save time and raise more money. In fact, new Donor Perfect users typically raise 25% more funding in their first year. Donor Perfect is trusted by over 50,000 nonprofit professionals with everything they need for efficient fundraising, so they can spend their time where it truly matters, on nurturing real, authentic relationships with their donors. Learn more at www.donorperfect.com. Now on to the episode. Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Nation. I'm your host, Julia Campbell, and I'm going to sit down with nonprofit industry experts, fundraisers, marketers, and everyone in between to get real and discuss what it takes to build that movement that you've been dreaming of. I created the Nonprofit Nation podcast to share practical wisdom and strategies to help you confidently find your voice, definitively grow your audience, and effectively build your movement. If you're a nonprofit newbie or an experienced professional who's looking to get more visibility, reach more people, and create even more impact, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hi everyone. So glad that you're here listening today. This is Nonprofit Nation, and I'm your host, Julia Campbell. Now, the question we're answering today and the topic is around nonprofit advocacy and influence. Now, we know that advocacy is a key tool for nonprofits aiming to influence policy and secure funding, but so many nonprofits struggle to do effective advocacy, whether it's due to a lack of resources or knowledge about where to focus. So today I'm joined by Bethany Snyder, a renowned expert in nonprofit advocacy and the founder of Snyder Strategies. And Bethany brings over 2 decades of experience in empowering nonprofit organizations to effectively influence policy and drive meaningful change. And with the 2024 elections on the horizon, we are going to talk about how nonprofit leaders can recognize their potential influence and not shy away from advocacy. So Bethany, thanks so much for coming. I'm excited to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. My favorite topic.
Yes. So what inspires you personally and professionally to focus on nonprofit advocacy?
Well, professionally, I have always been dedicated to seeing how policy can impact our world and change our culture. I'm part of the queer community. So I think right now we see how policy is obviously impacting my family's life and my life. And when I'm not working on other nonprofit and my clients' work, I'm the chair of our statewide LGBTQ organization, One Iowa Action. I also serve on the board of a national organization called Family Equality. I'm the chair of the Urbandale Civil Rights Commission. And what's something else I do? These are all things I do when I'm not working. I also lead a community organization called Central Iowa Rainbow Families. But what prompted me to do this professionally is I was working for Senator Al Franken during the Obamacare or Affordable Care Act era. And I was the person I worked in his state office. So I was the one connecting with organizations about what they wanted to see in the bill, what they wanted improved, what we needed to make sure certain communities were protected. And I was alarmed at the lack of communications I was getting from nonprofits. It scared me, honestly. I was like, I need to be hearing, my boss needs to be hearing from nonprofits about how the biggest healthcare bill that we're going to have for decades, maybe in my lifetime, unfortunately, I need to hear from nonprofits about how this is going to impact the people that they serve. I was hearing, of course, from very moneyed interests, pharma, insurance companies, but I don't believe that our policies are best made when only moneyed interests are shaping the policy. I want to hear from nonprofits who don't have a moneyed interest, but who also understand and are closest to the people at the center of the campaign.
What kind of communications do you think nonprofits should be sending to elected officials? Like, what were you looking for that you didn't receive?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I would say I talk about this a lot when I do trainings, is that I talk about
Hmm.
the four nonprofit advocacy superpowers. Is
Yes.
subject matter expertise, access to localized data, access to people with lived expertise, and then access to people who care and are motivated to act. So what I want is when a lawmaker or their staff gets a bill in front of them, they think, how does this impact the people in our community?
Hmm.
And when you're definitely when you're a legislator, when you're a staffer, I wasn't, my policy portfolio covered healthcare, LGBTQ, seniors, children. Now I'm a smart cookie, but there's like no way I can have an in-depth
Yeah.
understanding of all those things. And especially like just in healthcare, I had to know everything from pediatric dentistry to medical device, medical device markets to insurance markets to behavioral health care to NIH funding. Again, no way I can know that. So my job was, who are the experts in my community that I can call? And I want nonprofits to be in the cell phones of
Hmm.
these staffers and of these lawmakers.
Hmm.
Um, and so my first recommendation is I want nonprofits just be creating relationships with the lawmakers. And
Hmm.
especially don't even think about federal. That's a little bit intimidating. But your state lawmakers, your city lawmakers, your county lawmakers, they are in your community with you. Your kids might go to
Uh-huh.
daycare with them. And just let them know that your nonprofit exists and you have a subject matter expertise about the specific issue.
Hmm. We're making a lot of decisions, local officials, like I'm on the school board, and
Mm-hmm.
we work a lot with the select boards, and I live in a pretty small town. We have a regional school district, but I think of how there are big issues like housing insecurity that we're dealing with, and we have state laws that we're going to have to follow. And I would love to see more of the nonprofits in my community coming out and taking a stand, or even just giving information. And I know we connected over the recent Supreme Court case, the case around homelessness and criminalizing homelessness, like featuring arguments over whether
Mm-hmm.
people can be jailed for, sleeping outside if there's no
Mm-hmm.
shelter available. And I'm thinking about the deafening silence that I heard from nonprofits of all stripes, national, regional, local. What do you think is holding us back from contacting, not even just contacting legislators, but speaking out about these issues?
Well, first of all, the number one thing that's holding nonprofits back, and I call it the biggest conspiracy theory in the nonprofit sector, is that nonprofits
Yes.
can't engage in advocacy.
Yes. Let's just
Well,
bust this myth
yes.
now.
I don't know who started this myth, but it's absolutely
Probably someone that didn't want the nonprofits to speak up, like
absolutely. Yes, it is
maybe a
a
big company. I don't know.
yeah, a tool of the oppressor, we might say. But yeah, nonprofits have internalized this belief that they cannot engage in advocacy, that somehow it's against the law. Now, of course, there are rules, there are, reporting requirements, but especially like commenting on a Supreme Court case, there's nothing that says that nonprofits can't do that. There's
Hmm.
nothing that can say, this is what we're seeing. There's this case in the Supreme Court. This is how it relates to our community, or this is what we're
Yes.
seeing in our community, or this is how we are addressing homelessness in our community. There's nothing that says that you can't take a national storyline and
Yeah.
connect it to your own issues. Um, so, in addition to just this myth that nonprofits can't engage in advocacy, I th- I think that sometimes they think they don't know how they can contribute. They think which just blows my mind when they're like, "Well, I'm just housing the homeless, or I'm just feeding the hungry, or providing healthcare." We know that all those things are caused by failures of policy.
Hmm.
But these folks who are on the front lines every day see the impacts of bad policy every day and the impacts of good policy every day. They can say, this is what I see on the ground, and I see why we need this change. They have one of the most valuable perspectives on policy than I'd say any other part of our policy spectrum.
Hmm. Let's go back to the storytelling superpowers. I think we should really dive into each of them. So what was the first one?
Subject matter expertise.
Exactly. So how can nonprofits better develop or
Mhm.
get over maybe this imposter syndrome that they might have and really dive into being subject matter experts?
Well, first of all, I think they already are subject matter experts.
Right.
Yes, but
But they
first,
don't think they are,
they don't
maybe.
think they are. So I think
Hmm.
I like to share about this trend that's happening in nonprofit in
Yes.
our electoral cycle or lawmaker cycle. So there's a couple things that are happening right now that are causing a lack of subject matter expertise in Capitol Hills across the country and in city councils and all policy making bodies. We have a volatile electoral map.
Hmm.
Lawmakers are not staying in office as long. Now we can
Hmm.
debate whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, of
Hmm.
like because term limits are a good thing or a bad thing. But what is happening is before lawmakers would stay in office for a really long time. They might even come with some kind of policy knowledge, like maybe they're a farmer, so they know agriculture. And they would develop a policy expertise. Well, if they're not staying in office as long, they don't have the time to create that policy expertise.
Mm.
And when they do leave office, we lose that, right? It's institutional knowledge, it's institutional history.
Hmm.
We have that happening. Plus, we have this volatile electoral map. We are seeing lawmakers not being able, the incumbency factor. I feel like this is like a policy, like poli sci 101
Hmm.
class. We have this
Hmm.
thing called the incumbency factor, which once you're elected, it's easier to get reelected. Well, that's been decreasing.
Right.
Um, so we have that. Plus, many, especially at the federal level and at the state level, there's staff. Staff are not staying as long.
Hmm.
Being especially in these days, being a staffer in our capitals is not a great job. First of all, it's you get paid very low. I know nonprofit people
Uh-huh.
get paid low.
And the
They
emails
also
that you must get and the letters and the phone calls. Yeah.
absolutely, it's like people's calling up and yelling at you every single day is what the job is.
Hmm.
And so they're not staying as long. And so they're also policy experts. And what this is these two things combined mean that these lawmakers, they do not know, have an in-depth understanding of these really critical policy issues. I guarantee that you sitting in your nonprofit right now
Hmm.
have more knowledge about the issue that you're addressing than maybe any lawmaker in your city council, maybe probably any lawmaker in your city
Yep.
council and in your state government.
Yep.
Um, and I know that I know oftentimes nonprofits also think, well, I don't know all the rules or the regulations or the 75.62, like all the really
Yes.
gritty things that neither does the lawmaker.
Right.
And again, you don't need to know that. You just need to say, this is what we're working on in our nonprofit. This is what we're seeing. And this is what we think you should know.
Yep. Exactly. And if you listen to the way people like legislators, lawmakers, policy officials talk, a lot of it is contextualized in story. Because
Mhm.
if you're talking to a group of people about a bill and you're just talking about the data points in the bill, people's eyes are going to gloss over and the regular person's not going to listen. But the nonprofit can maybe offer a story or some context to this bill as to why it's important, why it's vital, or maybe why it's not important and vital and why it might be harmful. So these stories that we have and we're collecting are absolutely essential. And I just see this need to be telling them. And, I think there's that, what you said, there's that tendency for nonprofits to just want to put their heads down, do the work, and make a difference and not really get involved in
Mhm.
legislation. But I think that's personally irresponsible. I think personally, if you're we are subject matter experts and we need to embrace it and we need to talk about it. Okay. Love that. Second superpower. Remind me what it was.
Access to local data.
Yes. Okay. Let's talk about this and why this is so important and how we can use this.
Yes, our lawmakers need access to credible local data, and our nonprofits have that. You
Hmm.
are you are sharing this through those tedious grant reports that you have to provide all the time. You already have access to how many people you're serving, what the need is, what is working, what isn't working, the challenges, the barriers, the success. You are already writing this and all those dumb grant reports that you're required to write.
Hmm.
And this is what lawmakers need. They have no idea. They get these big bills and they have no idea. How does this relate to, you know, Chickasaw County or Taylor County or, Springfield, any state?
Hmm.
they have very little data about that. And you have this data, and that's really important.
Yes, I completely agree. And it's also combating maybe misinformation or maybe some bias data that's out there. So we have
Mhm.
the ability to go in and show what we're seeing on the ground in our
Mhm.
organization, and just once again help sort of contextualize the problem. What was
Mhm.
the third one?
Access to people with lived expertise.
Oh,
This
this
can
is so important.
Yes. I mean, again, talk about creating that context. Yes, we have, this we s- we see this is how many folks who are unhoused in our community. These are the folks that we are serving. But when you are able to lift up those stories, and even if they're not able to say them, you can use those stories to paint a picture about what is going on. Again, like what you said, numbers, people's head eyes glaze over. I do a whole training on story, how to use framing and narrative and storytelling and advocacy. But we know that people are more likely to remember facts
Hmm.
provided in a story. You know this.
Hmm.
And also, I always say a fact sheet never changed anyone's mind.
Never,
Never. Now you need
never.
the fact sheet to leave behind so the little policy people can go do their thing and have that data. But I cannot tell you how many times over and over again it is those stories that really touch people's hearts. So when I worked for Senator Franken, one of the things that I worked on very closely was children's mental health. And this is in Minnesota. They had this is like a decade ago, and so now this is a very popular program across the state. But at the time, or across the country, at the time it was very new, and it's school based mental health care.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the biggest challenges to get mental health care for
Mm-hmm.
anyone, but especially for kids, is you have to take off work, you have to go pick them
Mm-hmm.
up, they have to miss school, you have to go take them to the counselor's office. That's inconvenient for the child, it's inconvenient for the parent. Who is going to do that once a week?
Mm-hmm.
No one. So they had started this program that puts mental health professionals in the school and the kids can see them. And so we were really interested in how can we nationalize this program. So we visited schools across Minnesota that were doing this. And we remember talking to this woman who was a single mother, had two kids. I don't remember the particulars of her child's situation, but he was struggling in school and she knew he needed mental health, but she just could not provide it, could not get him there. And so their school had started this and it was so impactful to her life. My boss ended up using that to talk on the floor about the bill, talk to his
Mm-hmm.
colleagues about the bill.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we were able to use that story over and over again to connect it. Like this is how it impacts real people's lives, and we wouldn't have done that without this organization connecting us to this family.
Oh my gosh. So that's so powerful. All right. The
Mhm.
fourth superpower.
The fourth one is the best one ever. We
Yes.
have access to people who care and are motivated to act. And
Yes.
yes, and our legislative system, that is key. I know oftentimes nonprofits feel so powerless and downtrodden, and I know that the lines have been fuzzied about like who are people, are corporations people, but people vote. And that's what matters to lawmakers at the end of the day. They do want to get reelected. And
Mm-hmm.
we have people who care and are motivated to act.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you're when I talk to my clients, one of the mantras I say over and over again is your
Mm-hmm.
success inside the Capitol is dependent on your power outside the Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
You can have the best,
100%.
yeah, you can have the best lobbyist, the best fact sheet, the best, whatever. But
The
if
best video, but if you don't have
yeah,
any,
yeah,
yeah.
but if the lawmakers do not feel that political pressure, do not feel the political will, they'll just let it sit in their lap. And nonprofits have this gold mine that corporations don't have and that other folks don't have. We have people who care and are motivated to act.
Oh, this is why those kind of political action days, a lot of, because I work with a lot of rare disease
Mhm.
organizations like Dravet syndrome and
Mhm.
lupus advocacy, and even well, colorectal cancer. Those aren't very rare, but they all have political advocacy days where they
Mhm.
go to the Capitol and
Mhm.
they have their advocates and they have people and they wear their t-shirts and they have their signs and they drop literature off at the
Mhm.
legislators, the lawmakers office. And that power in numbers, the lawmakers see that.
Mhm.
And, the people making decisions, they see that. So I think there need to be more political action days,
Mhm.
around literacy, around food insecurity, around homelessness, around mental health, because it's just like you said, the power in numbers is what's going to grab that attention
Mhm.
and
And
really
not
convince people.
absolutely, and nonprofits are in the I mean, again, you write this in those, you know, those onerous grant reports every
Right.
month. We know that you know how hard you're working and who you're serving, and you can just tweak that information a little bit and share that with your lawmaker. And even I think like lobby days that you're talking about seem to some nonprofits like, oh my God, that is such a heavy lift. And it's a totally heavy lift, but it's not a heavy lift to look up your lawmaker right now and
Hmm.
sign up for their newsletter,
Right.
to look up for your lawmaker. And many sessions are ending now. So some people are like, oh, well, the session's over. Why should I contact my lawmaker? Well, now they have actually more time to
Hmm.
hear you out, talk to you, and you can lay the groundwork for next session. You can say, hey, I'd love to invite you to my organization to have a site visit. I'd love to have, if they have many state lawmakers have town halls or community coffees where they just sit in a coffee shop and wait for people to talk to them. Um, Go to that and bring your annual report and say, I'd love to share about our organization and what we're doing and how this connects to the work that you're doing in the state capitol.
I was going to ask you actually, what's the first step? And you told me.
Yeah.
So, are there other strategies that you've seen that really work to connect with policymakers and the public? Are there digital strategies? Should we be using multi-channel strategies?
Mhm. So, yes, a couple things. So, a number of things, connect with your lawmaker right now. You
Hmm.
are a leader in your community. You are a subject matter expert. Let them know if you have questions about if this comes up in front of you about lupus or about healthcare or about how folks get care in the community. I tell them I want you to have me on speed dial.
Yes.
Put me in your put me in your cell phone and you can call me and I'd be happy to walk through those issues with you.
Hmm.
Um,
So make yourself very accessible and upfront. I love that.
So a lot of folks are think about we don't have the capacity to do this in-house. So after you meet with your lawmaker, I am sure that there is someone else in your community working on an issue similar to yours. Even if you run, I even say like a rural feline rescue organization. I bet there's other people who are doing animal rescue. Find your allies and find out if there's a coalition.
Mm.
And then you can just attend the coalition meeting. Usually you can reach out to the coalition leader. So usually that's going to be a lead organization and say, hey, I'd like to learn more about your coalition. Now that session's over or when session ends, this is the perfect time to do it because they're thinking about what they're going to do next session. Say, hey, we run this organization in the community and this is what we can bring to the table. And think about what are your superpowers? Is it subject matter expertise? Is it localized data? Is it people with lived expertise? Or do you have access to people who care and motivated act? And say, this is what we can bring to the table. That way you are just hearing what's going on. And then you can decide, oh, this is a great time for us to act, or this is a great time for us to engage. Those are the two biggest things I would encourage people to do. Reach out to your state lawmakers over the summer and find out who your allies are and if there's any coalitions in your community.
That's amazing. That's really great. Do you have any sort of case studies that you're willing to share? Maybe where you helped a nonprofit get an advocacy win, or even just help them connect with advocacy and lawmakers?
Yeah. So when I work with my clients, I work with organizations that typically have some sort of advocacy program already. They have a legislative agenda. They've already been, they're already trying to work at the Capitol to pass laws. What I do is I come in and I help folks. How do you maximize your people power to have success?
Hmm.
Right. So I
Hmm.
say a lot of my clients haven't found that secret sauce to engage their people in their advocacy program. And that's where I come in and look at, okay, what are the barriers? What are the things that are holding, your organization back? And so a couple of organizations I've worked with this is one I love is the Minnesota Social Service Association. And so I have a case study on my website where they were just trying to figure out they were like, why we have these great members, they're across the state, they span all these great, human sector services. And a lot of these things they saw as detriments to their advocacy program. They're like, oh, we're so multi-issued, we can't come down on one. Or we're
Right.
statewide, so it's really hard to get. If we were just in Minneapolis, we'd have all this power. And I'm like, these are all things that other organizations wish they had. They wish
Mhm.
they were statewide. If you have that many, if you have this many subject matter experts in your network, think about all the lawmakers you can be connecting with. And I worked with them to figure out, okay, how do we, because we have all these issues that we cover, how do we figure out which ones rise to the top and which ones the
Mhm.
ones our members will get most jazzed about? So that's one of my, and they were one of my first clients. I still follow them online, and I can tell that they're putting the plan, they're implementing the plan, which is so great to see.
That is a great reframe because I can hear my listeners, some of them thinking, well, we work on so many issues. We
Hmm.
don't just have a laser focus on one issue. We have
Hmm.
25 programs and we serve 100 audiences.
Hmm.
How can we possibly drill down? But I love the reframe of seeing it as an opportunity,
Hmm.
that there are multiple topics where you are a subject matter expert,
Hmm.
and there are multiple topics on which you could share stories and share some perspective
Hmm.
and provide context. So I really like the reframe that it's not a hindrance, it's actually an opportunity.
Yep. And you just need to have a system to figure out, okay, what are we gonna focus on this year? And I help them create a rubric, that looks at all the different things. So then they're like, okay, this is the issue that's rising to the top and where we can focus our energies.
Mhm. So, how do you measure the impact of advocacy initiatives? I know that's a challenge. And like, how would even a small or even a large nonprofit measure their results?
Yeah, it's hard with policy because it can take decades. One of my
Hmm.
first campaigns I worked on was Clean Indoor Air Acts. How's that for a throwback?
Right.
Um, when I talk to college campuses, I love to say, you guys could be smoking cigarettes right now in this lecture hall. You'd have ashtrays on your chair, and they're like, minds are
Oh,
blown.
yeah.
I know, now like your face, you're like,
Yeah,
not
no, I always tell my kids
that.
like you could smoke in restaurants and bars
Yeah.
in the 80s or even the 90s in
Mhm.
Boston, and they can't believe it.
Yes. Yeah. So if you have someone inside the Capitol, like a lobbyist, they can share on whether lawmakers seem receptive to the message, that they are softening or, more interested in information. Um, but you can also see in some nonprofits, there's a lot of metrics that show when you engage in advocacy, it increases your bottom line. Advocacy messages have higher open rates and click rates than fundraising messages. A donor engaged in advocacy gives more money than a donor not engaged in advocacy,
Hmm.
et cetera, et cetera. So there's also those kinds of things you can measure as well.
That's very interesting. I did not
Hmm.
know that. Because I'm always
Hmm.
interested in open rates. I'm interested in engagement. I am sure that social media engagement increases when you're talking about advocacy because
Hmm.
it's going to be provocative. It's going to
Hmm.
get people excited, interested, inspired, and it might turn some people off, but I think that's fine as well.
Yeah.
So that's another question. I know when you're doing advocacy, it doesn't actually matter the issue. You really could be rescuing baby kittens.
Hmm.
You're going to get pushback from someone somewhere.
Yeah.
And if you're working on a particularly polarizing or controversial issue, you're going to get a lot of probably negative feedback.
Hmm.
How do you advise your clients on dealing with this?
So one of the things that holds nonprofits back from engaging in advocacy
Hmm.
is this. Well, first, I talked about they think advocacy equals politics. They conflate advocacy and politics together, which it's not. It's very different. But they also feel like advocacy is adversarial because this is what we see playing out around us, right? On the CNNs and the Fox News, people fighting. But when it comes to advocacy, I always say it's just like going to work. You're going to have difficult people you need to deal with at work. It doesn't mean that you're like not going to show up to work that day. It just means you have to come up with coping skills to deal with that unpleasant person. And the same with advocacy. Not everyone we're going to deal with is going to be awesome and great, but we're just going to work, and we need to be able to just like put that aside. And I say this when people complain about, not complain's not a very nice word, but when people talk about, oh, my lawmaker, um, they don't like who their lawmaker is. And I remind people that we are the boss. We hire and fire our candidates through elections. Oftentimes, the person that we want elected or hired, we've all been on hiring committees, is not hired. Just because my preferred candidate didn't make it the hiring committee doesn't mean I don't get to show up for work the next day. I
Mhm.
still have to work with that person. And so that's how I think about advocacy. You're just going to work. We have to deal with unpleasant people and things all the time. And that's how I think about it. In terms of like the controversy with your maybe your stakeholders, um, I would say that that just takes a lot of education. It's about launch, like kind of like launching a new fundraising campaign or a capital campaign. People are like, why do we need this building? Do we really need this building? It's just doing that education on how this connects to our mission and why this is important and how this is going to solve our problem in the future.
Wow, that's really great. I know you are going to be dealing with difficult people no matter what you do. And we have agency, we do have agency over how we react to things and how we deal with people and the type, the way that we are presenting ourselves at work.
Mhm.
I agree with you. And I just know that, sometimes you might need, if you're like dealing with social media, especially in advocacy, or you're dealing with emails and you're getting a lot of emails, you just might need to take a mental
Yeah.
health break from it,
Yeah.
or talk to an ally at work and say, look, this is a particularly controversial issue.
Mhm.
And I just need to kind of take a little bit of a break from monitoring the comments, or,
Absolutely.
get
Yeah.
some help with that.
But
That's
before
great.
we sign off, we should definitely talk
Yeah.
about the election coming up.
Yeah. So I want to look ahead to the 2024
Mhm.
elections. Um, and yeah, what should nonprofits start doing now? Like, what can we start doing now that to ensure that we're going to, make a big impact?
Okay, so this is what I love because when I talk about what politics is and how nonprofits conflate advocacy with politics, there's three things that are politics: political parties, candidates, and elections. So as long as you stay away from those three things, you're not going to violate any IRS law. So people are like, Bethany,
Mhm.
why are we talking about the elections then? Isn't that one of those things that we can't do? And I have a little asterisk next to it because there's lots of things that nonprofits can do. The election is such an awesome opportunity to talk about your issue and how it relates to policy,
Mhm.
specifically with candidates. The best time to educate a lawmaker is when they are a candidate.
Yes.
They aren't backed into a corner yet, especially if they're a new candidate. They're not backed into a corner. They haven't solidified all their positions on everything. And they literally come and knock on your door and ask you for your opinion. I guarantee that once they're elected, they will not knock on your door and ask you for
Mhm.
your opinion. Maybe the next election cycle, but if they're incumbent, they're going to do less of that because of the incumbency factor. And
Mhm.
I joke around, I hear rumors that people don't talk to these candidates. And that blows my mind. This is when they come to your door and they ask, what's important to your community? You say, I'm so glad you asked. I am the leader of a nonprofit organization that serves this community. And this is how policy is failing our community right now. And I can't wait to tell you more. And you tell them all the things. And then you follow up and you send them your fact sheet or your annual
Mhm.
report and say, I'm excited to talk to you more about this issue. That is completely fine. And then
Mhm.
teach your stakeholders, your constituencies, how to talk to their candidates when they come to their door. Give them talking points, give them a little like handout, create questions they can ask at candidate forums.
Oh
Um,
wow, that's awesome. That's a great idea.
yeah, say, hey, this is something that's in our community. We have all these, feral baby kitties in our community that need homes. How will you work with our organization to make sure all these baby kitties get homes? I mean, that is there's so many things you can do that are outside of endorsing a candidate, um, saying this candidate's better than that candidate. Just saying, again, this is a need in our community. How are you going to address it?
100%. That's what really trips nonprofits up, like you said.
Mhm,
They think that advocacy equals saying if they're Republican or a Democrat, and
mhm,
that's not it at all.
mhm,
And simply demanding, well, not demanding, asking for accountability from a candidate is
mhm,
not being partisan. It is not
mhm,
violating IRS rules. And
mhm.
it's part of our job to educate people.
Yes.
It's part of our job to spread the word about something that, what we think is important. I love the idea of candidate forums because I've been to them as a school committee candidate, but also just, in the community for other positions. And the people that go are often talking about something very specific to them. Like, my recycling is not getting taken
Mhm,
out, or, my
mhm,
sidewalk, I want a stop sign on my street. So why don't we, as leaders in our community, and I love that framing, we are leaders in our community, talk more publicly at these forums and talk about the issues that should be on the forefront,
Yeah.
and push them to the forefront.
And that you see
So
every
yeah,
day. You see every
yep.
day, we're talking about every day. It's just like talking to a future donor about an issue or a potential donor saying this is why this is important in our community, except for you're not asking for money, you're asking them to make a policy change.
Mm-hmm. No, that is so hugely important. And I do think I love that idea of that it is an election cycle and this is an opportunity. I think
Mhm.
nonprofits see election cycles as challenges because they think, oh, we can't fundraise, no one's going to be paying attention to us. But it is a fantastic way to get your message out there in a very relevant and timely
Mhm.
manner because people are thinking about change. They're thinking about changing the world and their vision for a better world and who might lead
Mhm.
that vision
Mhm.
and the changes that they want to see in their community. So it's on top of mind for people, and we should be capitalizing on that.
And also, nonprofits are trusted sources of information. In our political system, there's very few, well, the public confidence in our public information systems is waning, but we know through research that people still value and believe what nonprofits say. They see them as trusted places to get information. And so
Mm-hmm.
other ways that nonprofits can get engaged is just by telling people, how do you register to vote? There's so many new voting laws over the last 5, 6 years. Where do we vote? How can we vote? Is there mail-in ballots? Is there early voting?
Mm-hmm.
All of those things. We know that when nonprofits engage in that kind of voter democracy, that we have a more equitable system. And Nonprofit Vote has done a lot of research on this. And so those are just other ways, just giving information about how to vote,
Right.
giving your staff time off to vote. Sometimes that's required. It's laws in many states. Give your staff and volunteers information about how to serve as election judges or poll workers or do nonpartisan get out the vote stuff. Yeah, all those
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm. Yes. All right. How can people work with you, Bethany? How can they contact you? Where can they find you online?
Oh, well, thank you. So you can go to my website, snyderstrategies.me. And like I said, I work with nonprofit organizations, typically mid-size, smaller to mid-size organizations that already are in the advocacy space. They already have
Mm-hmm.
some sort of legislative agenda. They know they need to make policy change, but they just haven't figured out that secret sauce to getting their people engaged. And they know that
Mm-hmm.
that's what they need to really win. So you can also follow me on LinkedIn. Um, I have a training coming up called Beyond the Ballot, how
Oh,
nonprofits
cool.
can win this election. So that's on my website. It's a free training if you are an Iowa Nonprofit Alliance member, but only $10 for any other nonprofit person. I really want to make this accessible. And another thing I love to do is to give trainings. I give advocacy
Mm-hmm.
trainings regularly on to teach your folks why advocacy is important, how to engage effectively, and how they can use their voice to really help you meet your mission.
Yay, that's awesome. And I know you do a lot of speaking. So if you need a fantastic keynote speaker, Bethany would love to speak to you
Yeah.
about that. But it's called Beyond the Ballot. I'll put it in the show notes for everyone. So this was so valuable and helpful. This is a topic that I am incredibly passionate about. And I really love to shed light on like the myths, what's holding us back, and then how we can move forward in this space. So thanks so much, Bethany, for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, hey there. I wanted to say thank you for tuning into my show and for listening all the way to the end. If you really enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast app, and you'll get new episodes downloaded as soon as they come out. I would love if you left me a rating or a review because this tells other people that my podcast is worth listening to. And then me and my guests can reach even more earbuds and create even more impact. So that's pretty much it. I'll be back soon with a brand new episode. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at JuliaCampbell77. Keep changing the world, you nonprofit unicorn.